In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Course-Educa, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful Podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. Credibility isn't just about being trusted. It's about being known and liked for the right reasons. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin, and today we're exploring three essential themes: mastering credibility for influence, the power of credibility in leaderships, and the future of thought leaderships in an AI-driven world. Our guest today is Mitchell Levy, a 2x TEDx speaker, best-selling author of over 60 books, and a globally recognized credibility expert. As the founder of Credibility Nation, Mitchell has interviewed over 500 thought leaders to redefine what it means to be credible in today's fast-changing world. He has built 20 businesses in Silicon Valley, served as an NASDAQ board chairman, and pioneered thought leadership strategies that helps executive and entrepreneur gain clarity, credibility, and influence. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. Your supports help more people find meaningful content just like this. Let's begin. Mr. Mitchell Levy, welcome on a Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're very glad to have you, and you're certainly a serial entrepreneur, so we're very, very eager to dive deeper into your story. But to kick us off, please tell us more about Credibility Nation.
You know, one of the things I did between 2019 and 2020, I went on a Napoleon Hill journey. So as Napoleon Hill interviewed 500 millionaires to write Think and Grow Rich, Mitchell Levy interviewed 500 thought leaders on the concept of credibility, and subsequently created a company or website called Credibility Nation, wrote a book, did a TEDx. And what's interesting, and we'll get into this a little bit more, as an entrepreneur, there's always opportunities to morph to something else. And so as valuable as credibility is, as valuable as clarity is, about a couple months ago, I now have a slightly different view of the world. And so credibility, just to give you a quick summary of it, the definition of credibility in the dictionary is not 100% accurate. In the dictionary, it'll say the quality in which one is trusted. But in today's world where there's AI, there's lots of deep fakes, there's lots of computer-computer interaction or human-to-computer interaction, the most important thing we can do is understand, and so this is what credibility is, the quality in which you're trusted, the quality in which you're known, and the quality in which you're liked. So it's no longer the know, like, trust, but it's the trust, know, like. And on the know part, it's not that I know of you, it's that I know who you are and how you show up in the world.
Interesting. All right. So how would you accommodate and perhaps make the right definition of credibility in the dictionary? Do you have an idea?
Oh, so that's what the research did. The definition is the quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked.
Okay, great. So you added known and liked. I like it. All right. That's very interesting. And truly, Mitchell, I want to go basically back to some of how you got started, because you were obviously very successful in many niches, and we're going to talk about that as well. But at the very, very perhaps center of your entrepreneurial mindsets, what was the biggest, basically, was it because of your family being in business? What was basically the first driver that caused you to have the entrepreneur's mindset in the first place? What does that come from for you?
That's a great question. I can't tell you whether or not it was something that was born into me. There's nobody in the family that are entrepreneurs.
Interesting.
But we're all born in different ways. I was working, I did the traditional the traditional thing. Undergraduate, got an MBA, went to work at an investment firm, large bank, then a startup in Silicon Valley. And then I went to Sun Microsystems. So Sun Microsystems, for those that don't know, they were the firm that really, really helped bring computers, the internet into the world today. And I was there for 9 years. When I left running the e-commerce component of Sun's supply chain, which was $3.5 billion. Now, the reason I left, it was the dot-com days. And during the dot-com days, I actually heard one of the big consulting firms at a meeting stand up and say the following: if you could spell the word e-commerce, we're hiring you. And so it was hard not to dip my toes in the water as an entrepreneur, because it was so much. There was a couple of things that led at that stage. So like I said, I can't tell you if there was anything before, but what I could tell you, two things came to bear. One, it was too easy. I had spent so much time on e-commerce and infrastructure and making things happen that when I put up my shingle, e-commerce consultant or e-commerce manager, what was interesting, and we can come back to that one. It was hard not to be successful. The other thing was it was hard not to be successful. Yes. Okay. Sometimes I do double negatives and I'm not always sure they work right, but yes. So the other thing was I wasn't convinced that the decisions made by management were the right decisions all the time. The concept that Scott McNeely, the CEO of Sun at the time, had was a world that was you've got right and wrong, you've got competitor and friend. And some of the decisions that were made, I think, were not the right decisions. Ultimately, the company is not here anymore, which may say something, although you use Java, which was something that was invented out of Sun, and Oracle ended up buying Sun, and Java is used in almost everything that we do.
Yes.
But the decisions led to ultimately the demise, and I thought, I want to be part of the management team of a very successful company. And so that was, I needed to go out and do my own thing. And then I wanted to do something at some point in time that would be part of the management team of a successful company. And I realized, hey, if I start my own company, I will be part of the management team. One of the things that happened, I was invited to be part of a board of a public firm. So I was a board member of a NASDAQ listed firm for 9 years as well.
Interesting. All right. And that basically spiraled and just made you build 20 actually business in Silicon Valley, 4 of those which were publishing companies, if I get this right, which is quite outstanding, obviously. And you build that with a mindset, obviously, that is necessary, but also the skills that are necessary to do so. And truly, I was wondering, from your perspective, what was the biggest lesson that you learned from building, again, 20 business? I don't want to understate this. Most people don't build one, let alone 20. What are some of the biggest, basically, lessons you took from such an endeavors?
There are so many different lessons, so you could keep diving in and poking. But I'll give one that I see. The C is often a huge mistake. Okay, so the most important lesson is to start a company or start a product or start a service that people actually want to buy. I know that sounds really simple. It doesn't have to be what's in your mind. It's what people really want. And oftentimes I find overall that many times I'm better together. So I might find a partner that I want to work with, and we may quickly decide that we want to do something together. Now, mistake number one that most people make, they spend all this time talking about what happens here, what happens there, putting contracts in place. By the time they're done, they never get any clients. Huge waste of time. So for me, if I find a partner I want to work with and start up a company, we look at each other, we shake each other's hand, whether it's virtually or physically, and we go, okay, what's the split? And then many times it's just a 50-50 split. Okay, let's find our first customer. That's when we'll kick off. Sometime during that process of adding value to that client, the proverbial shit will hit the fan. And when it does, what you need to determine as a partner of this other person is, are they saying the same things in the room when you're not in it? So if that's the case, the question becomes, is this somebody you want to work and be in business with? Now, of all the times I've done this, there was only once that there was somebody that just didn't answer the question the right way. Normally my hunch, my intuition is good enough. Mm-hmm. It's at that stage, after you've had your first client, after you've had fun, that you go, you know what, let's create a company. And then you do the paperwork. And so I'm going to say make sure you identify a need. If you're partnering with somebody else, and it's so much easier when you do it with somebody else. Oh yeah. Make sure that you can work with that partner by actually doing it in real life, actually having a client. And after that, then worry about the details that many companies need to have the legal structure in place. And you hear all these stories, knock on wood, hasn't happened with me yet where people stole my IP or people cheated out of money, but it happens all the time.
Yes.
So I do agree the importance of having the right types of legal procedures and processes in place, the right types of balances and controls. And ultimately, though, you don't need to do any of that until you've satisfied a client, you've made money, you've had fun, and you decide, oh, this is a company we want to make.
Love that. Reminds me of Reid Hoffman, actually, which you might be familiar with. But an entrepreneur is truly someone who just jump off a cliff and then find a way to build a plan on the way down. And I love this. I love this proof of concept first. I was just in the mentoring groups, working with some basically young entrepreneurs with some great ideas. And they always say what you said not to do, which is, hey, let's start to plan the paperwork, right? Let's start to incorporate and register the company. And they don't even have a tangible ideas of who the client is yet, what's the pricing. There's so many other questions prior to doing such things. So I really appreciate basically this sound advice. Thank you a lot. And truly one thing that was a major part of your journey, and I was able to read some of your books and get in trenches with some of your work, but it's truly mastering thought leaderships, right? Becoming a trust authority. That circles back to the credibility factor, but you are top 100, obviously, thought leaders, and actually number one in the ecosystem of Thinker 360. And truly, I was wondering for you, if you had to put some tangible action items and tangible lessons, how can entrepreneurs and executive position themselves as a thought leaders in their industry in a world where it is so competitive, in a world where it's never been this competitive? What are some of your main insights and perhaps lessons you took along the way to help people do better at credibility and thought leadership?
So I will give you the answer that I might have intuitively had for many of the years of doing entrepreneurship, but I can tell you since I started doing the research on credibility and certainly who I am now. So one thing that's probably not listed on the paperwork, I am the number one clarity person on the planet. I could sit with any company or any human and help them articulate where they're executing on their purpose in less than 10 words. Once you have that, everything else becomes simple. Now, I wanted to say that by then going to the next level, and that is thought leadership. What people think about for thought leadership, that definition is all over the place. For sometimes people think of it's, oh, I'm an influence and I'm the RFK, I'm influencing health, for the entire country, right? Or I am whatever the thing is. And what people do, one of the things that we've been taught, which is wrong, is we've been taught to cast a really big fish net. The bigger the audience we could actually say we address, the more clients we could potentially get in, because we only need to capture 0.5% of the entire total available market and we'll be gazillionaires, right? So that's wrong. Absolutely wrong. So what is most important is to identify with clarity who you serve. If you are a credible human, if you have a credible company, you are of service to others. And so if you're a service to others, By the way, if you're not of service to others, you don't have a company. There's no need, right? So if you're a service to others, and this is, Sam, I'm going to give you the secret formula. Is that okay? Do you mind if I?
Absolutely. The floor is yours.
There's a secret formula of clarity. This is something that came out of my interviewing 500 thought leaders on credibility. Now, let me tell you why I don't mind sharing it. First of all, I want everyone to have it. But what I could say is, even when I gift people the formula, 98% still don't get it right. They don't get it right because we're so full of these marketing cookie cutter approaches. And so what would happen on the interviews, I'd send people a 16-minute video saying, hey, here's how you prep for the video. Here's the first question I'm going to ask you. And the first question is, and I've come up with a phrase, it's an acronym called CPOP. And I ask, what is your CPOP? CPOP stands for Customer Point of Possibilities. Mm-hmm. And so let me give you the formula. It is in 1, 2, or 3 words, who do you serve? So if you say humanity, too big, right? So too broad of a term. So in 1, 2, or 3 words, who do you serve? And then the second part of the formula, so the CPOP is the who, what. The second part of the formula is what is either, and from their perspective, what is their pain point or what is their pleasure point? Mm-hmm. So I'll give you a couple because I actually today, I most of the time encourage people to have until they get a handle on everything, to have one CPOP. I have 2 because I have 2 distinct audiences I'm going after. So I'll tell you the first one. So I'm also an executive coach. I'm part of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. And so as an executive coach, what makes me different than others? Well, what I'm going to say is, let me give you my CPOP. It's 9 words. So it starts with the who. So Inc. 5,000 CEOs, that would be the who. So the whole CPOP is 9 words. Inc. 5,000 CEOs leading the future with executive abundance. Now, the goal of a CPOP is for the person who's hearing, they're either going to be one of 3 people. They either are someone who is a referral partner or a potential referral partner. They're either somebody who's a prospect, or they could be somebody who doesn't care. It doesn't mean they don't care about you. It just means they don't care about the playground you play at. Mm-hmm. But if they are one or two, if they are a referral partner or a prospect, they're going to say, Mitchell, I've never heard of executive abundance. What do you mean? Now you have the opportunity to share in less than a minute. What does that mean to you? To be clear, and by the way, people don't talk about it, but to be clear about it, it's if you're in a fast-growing company, you've most likely spent a good amount of time and energy focused on one stakeholder group, investors, and you've made your investors happy. You may have done that at the expense of customers, employees, partners, and your own family. So those are the 5 stakeholder groups: investors, customers, partners, employees, and family. And you often heard of the exec who's done really well. You may have interviewed a couple of them, but they're also going through a divorce, right? Oh, and it's right. So that's one piece of it. I'll give you the other one, right? I do that because there I get to affect a world that is the CEO and all the employees of the company. So it's very broad. On a very tactical level, I want to be able to use tools properly. I want to be able to use social media properly. I want to be able to get immediate feedback. And so what I've done is I've also focused on a different CPOP and a different audience. So typically that audience may be a similar audience that you focus on, and it's business owners using LinkedIn to create calendar appointments, right? It's business owners using LinkedIn to be successful. And so there, the goal is using LinkedIn in such a way where we encourage that particular company. It's called social compliment, and it's supposed to complement who you are as a human. And just to be clear, if you're listening to this and you've paid money for LinkedIn stuff and you've been unsuccessful and you know that's where your clients are, but you've not been successful, at the end of the day, what we've done is we've structured, we being me, so sorry for the generic me. What I've done is created a world where everything happens in a regular procedural process way where ultimately you're spending 30 minutes a day in LinkedIn Messenger. And the goal of being in LinkedIn Messenger, if you gave somebody a happy birthday and they say, thanks so much, hey, it's been a while, is for you to recognize that and book time on their calendar, right? You take that, yeah, it has been a while. Let's get time together, right? It's when people speak in Messenger, you need to find the opportunities where it makes sense to have a conversation. And ultimately, it's when you think about social media, what I think about is those are two words. And when you think about those two words, I'm going to say most everyone who's trying to sell you something is focused on the wrong word, right? They're focused on media. Hey, you have access to media. You can now scream from the rooftops and say how important you are. That's the wrong word. The real word is social. And so going back to the concept of thought leadership, the more narrow you could focus your audience, the more closely you could have an audience of people who pay attention to the things you do because they understand you care about that. So if I give you a slightly updated definition of thought leadership, a thought leader is somebody who has one or more people following their thoughts.
It's pretty wide. All right, interesting. I love it. You seem to be definitely a student of the English language, and perhaps I am as well. So we definitely have that as a similarities. And it reminded me of basically, I think it was Jeff Bezos going basically to an interview and saying that your brand is what people say when you're not in the room. Right. And they're saying how important basically credibility and branding is in this world. But truly, you called credibility the new currency. Which is very interesting. There was another few people calling attention the new currency, but credibility was at the front and center of everything that you were doing, and that's why I basically unfold the studies you were mentioning. But from your perspective, obviously spending decades now within this field, why do you think that credibility is more important now than ever? And what are some of the key traits of a credible leader so that they can perhaps get some fantastic insights from your studies?
You know, we'll quickly do, actually, let me do two things before I answer your question. So first, Bezos' definition by saying brand is what people talk about you when you're not in the room. That's also, to me, the definition of legacy. Legacy is what people say about you when you're not around.
Sure.
Now, not around meaning you could be dead, but more importantly, it's not around us when you're not in the room. Right? What do people think about you? Do they talk about you? The second thing you mentioned that you started mentioning attention versus credibility.
Yes.
You know, many people want to play the attention game. If people pay attention to me and I build my brand more and more and there are influencers that have attention. Not all those influencers are financially, you hear about those that have a lot of money. You don't hear about those that have not been able to monetize that attention. Your clients, depending on who you are and what you do, may not need to hear about you all the time. They do, however, need to hear about you at the time in which they're ready to buy, right? And when they're ready to buy, that's when credibility is important. That's when, if they trust you, they may go to you first. Now, if you're a trusted service provider and somebody comes to you that's not a prospect, and they say, I want to buy from you, you have to be strong enough to say, no, you don't. It is better off that you do something else. That person will ultimately be better served, and that person will ultimately be a great referral partner for you. But there are times in which being credible means doing the right thing. So you asked about what are the values of credibility. There are 10 values. Under being trusted, known, and liked, there are 10 ultimate values. I could go through all of them, or I could give you the top value of each pillar. Which would you prefer?
Just name them for now.
All right. So under being trusted, vulnerability, external integrity, authenticity, and coachability. Under being known, it's being a servant leader, having both the intent and commitment to do the right thing. And I said before, external integrity, under being trusted. Under being known, it's your internal integrity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you the other two in a second. What's really interesting is, you ever been in a meeting, Sam, and you're talking to somebody, whether it's online or in person, and the hair in the back of your neck sticks up? Like, there's something wrong here, but you don't know what it is?
Yeah.
I'm going to postulate that this is your intuition. It's your intuition recognizing that the external integrity, the stuff that's coming out of that person's mouth, does not match up with their internal integrity. And so that's one of the things that came out of the research. It's the only word that has appeared twice in the 10 values is integrity. I didn't actually know right away why, but about a year later, what popped into my mind, it was external integrity and internal integrity. And that's where, the hair in the back of your neck sticks up. Now, under being likable, I want to give you the 2 values, but if you don't mind, I'll talk a little bit about each.
Sure. Absolutely.
So listen, if you want to be likable, there are 2 things you want to do. It's really simple. Brother, everything I do is really simple. It's just not always easy, right? So here's the thing. Number 1 is to show respect. Now, how do you show respect? For a podcast, you'll notice if you take a look at when I showed up, I came 10 minutes early. So showing respect means coming early, coming prepared, coming with your heart. Right? How many times have you come to a meeting and people are like guarded? Why are they there in the first place? Right? If they don't show the respect to know who you are, to watch your shows, to do the research, why am I engaging? Right? And sometimes that happens. But it is a sign of disrespect when you do that.
Yes.
Right? The other thing, I've come up with a new word called cred dust. And so it's spreading cred dust.
Okay.
Right. And that's sharing the ideas, thoughts, and actions of others. Sam, you're doing that for me right now. And I appreciate that. Right. So one of the things we've been taught is, and this is the old command and control structure, that the guy at the top has all the ideas or the girl at the top has all the ideas. And we never give credit to the people below us. Well, that's absolutely wrong. The best thing you could do is spread the ideas, thoughts, and actions of others. When you quote one of those things I say in this interview, 6 months from now, I want you to say, Mitchell Levy said this and it's stuck in my mind, right? That's spreading my cred dust. That gives incremental credibility to you.
Interesting. Is it always best to have more cred dust? Is there a ceiling where credibility become perhaps shooting yourself in the foot to a certain extent, or I suppose overdoing it, or you didn't see this yet?
I'm going to say I've never really given a lot of thought to that question, but I'm going to tell you from an intuitive perspective, yes, there's always a fine line. You could always overdo. Like if the only thing you ever did is quote somebody else with every word out of your mouth, that's also going to be probably too much, although that hasn't happened much in life. But I could remember the biggest problem in that particular world, you become what other people call a know-it-all.
Yes.
Right. And if you're a know-it-all, that means you're speaking more than you're listening. And the most important thing we could do is listen. Right.
No, exactly. And the main function of leadership, in my opinion, is obviously to create more leaders, not more followers. And that's very, very much very important to recall as well. And one thing though that always struck me, I was able to basically get 2 of your TED Talks, which was very interesting. And you're obviously very, very vibrant and, in my opinion, outstanding public speaker. But I was definitely the thing that struck with me the most is how well you're able to take a very, very big concept, something that is quite complicated, and make it very simple, right? That was also one of Einstein's laws of understanding. If you cannot explain it simply, you don't understand it enough, perhaps. And you do that very, very well. But I was wondering, from being on those big stages, obviously TEDx is probably one of the biggest speaking companies in the whole world as we speak. What did you learn, and perhaps how did you get so good at delivering basically those messages in a way in which truly stick with your audience? Is there anything you can recall that you do, or perhaps other world-class speakers does, that simply need to be implemented in anyone that wants to speak more clearly?
That's a good question. it had about 3 questions in there, but let me pick one.
Please.
Right. So I'm going to ask the question in a slightly different way because it's more than just speaking, right? It's the question I'm going to say is, how could you have the clarity of thought and approach so that in any situation you make it very clear on both the listener and the speaker that you're delivering value or you're solving the right problem? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So it's really interesting. I'm one of those unique characters that can tell you that I've been using things that I've learned in my undergraduate degree my entire life. And so many people say, I went to school for this, but I'm not doing any of that. And I'm like, for me, I just got lucky. My undergraduate degree was a Bachelor of Science in Stochastic and Deterministic Models of Operational Research.
All right. Okay.
Right. Basically, the short answer of that, I've been taught to model people and systems and improve them. And there's a tool. There are many tools that I learned. When I did the research, I didn't have to study how to do a research study. I just sort of remembered some of the stuff I learned. But there's an approach that I use in everything that I do. Now, Sam, you don't have a piece of paper and a pencil with you, do you?
Yes, I do. I always have my note takers nearby.
If you do, do me a favor and do that. And listen, if you're listening, do this. Trust me, it'll change your life for the rest of your life. Okay. So on a piece of paper, draw a box, middle of the piece of paper, draw a box, and then create a line that goes into the left-hand side of the box, and then have a line that goes out of the right-hand side of the box. Now let's put labels on those 3 objects. On the left-hand side, we're going to put input. So the line that goes into the box is input. The box itself, we're going to call black box. And on the right-hand side, we're going to do output. Okay, so here's what's really interesting. You ask any human a question, their response is going to be a black box response, right? Because what happens is they're going to look at their inputs and outputs to be able to answer your question. They may not be looking at you and your situation. So first, let me answer it from a public speaking perspective. Mm-hmm. If you said to me, Mitchell, I'd like you to talk about this, and then you said to me, and I go, what's the output? I mean, I asked you a couple of questions up front. What do you get out of a podcast? What are you looking for? What's your motivation, right? And you told me, well, this is a fun, organic conversation, and I want my audience to grow and learn. I'd like to feature your thought leadership. I spread my cred dust. You didn't know that term yet. And I go, interesting. So if you said to me, Mitchell, the input, open-ended conversation, I'd like you to tell me about thought leadership, and I want you to do it as an output. I want you to do it in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. If I knew the input, I'm interacting with you, and I knew I had 30 seconds, I could answer and give you a robust definition of thought leadership in 30 seconds. If you said to me, on the other hand, Mitchell, I give you 10 minutes. Now the output is different.
Yes.
And so what I will do is I will craft an approach. I might include a story of that so that, I'll give you a theory and a story, and then I'll give you the theory again. Right. So what happens is the architecture of the speech or whatever I'm saying will be based on my inputs and outputs. So if you're doing a TEDx, okay, what is the theme of the TEDx and how much time does each speaker get? Okay. And then within those parameters, what is your one theme? What is your one thing that is an idea worth spreading? And how could you spread that idea and talk about it in such a way where there's zero commercial, like you can do zero marketing or advertising, in a TEDx, which by the way is a phenomenal lesson. From a guy who's a born marketer, like being able to produce an idea worth sharing, that first one was incredibly hard. I mean, it was painfully hard, right? But once you do one, you're like, oh, I can do this. This is great. Let's spread the idea first. Let's spread the notion first. And then we'll tie it in later. So whether it's a business decision, a business idea, where to go to dinner, anything that you have as a decision, instead of thinking about jumping right into the black box, why do you ask questions on the inputs and the outputs? And all of a sudden, the black box becomes easy. So as a entrepreneur, I've trained my teams to focus on that. And now, Sam, you don't have a piece of paper and a pencil with you, do you?
Yes, I do. I always have my note takers nearby.
If you do, do me a favor and do that. And listen, if you're listening, do this. Trust me, it'll change your life for the rest of your life. Okay. So on a piece of paper, draw a box, middle of the piece of paper, draw a box, and then create a line that goes into the left-hand side of the box, and then have a line that goes out of the right-hand side of the box. Now, let's put labels on those three objects. On the left-hand side, we're going to put input. So the line that goes into the box is input. The box itself, we're going to call black box. And on the right-hand side, we're going to do output. Okay, so here's what's really interesting. You ask any human a question, their response is going to be a black box response. Right? Because what happens is they're going to look at their inputs and outputs to be able to answer your question. They may not be looking at you and your situation. So first, let me answer it from a public speaking perspective. If you said to me, Mitchell, I'd like you to talk about this. And then you said to me, and I go, what's the output? I mean, I asked you a couple of questions up front. What do you get out of a podcast? What are you looking for? What's your motivation? Right. And you told me, well, this is a fun, organic conversation, and I want my audience to grow and learn. I'd like to feature your thought leadership. I spread my cred dust. You didn't know that term yet. And I go, interesting. So if you said to me, Mitchell, the input, open-ended conversation. I'd like you to tell me about thought leadership, and I want you to do it as an output. I want you to do it in 30 seconds. If I knew the input, I'm interacting with you, and I knew I had 30 seconds, I could answer and give you a robust definition of thought leadership in 30 seconds. If you said to me, on the other hand, Mitchell, I give you 10 minutes. Now the output is different.
Yes.
And so what I will do is I will craft an approach. I might include a story of that, so that, I'll give you a theory and a story, and then I'll give you the theory again. Right. So what happens is the architecture of the speech, or whatever I'm saying, will be based on my inputs and outputs. So if you're doing a TEDx, okay, what is the theme of the TEDx, and how much time does each speaker get? Okay. And then within those parameters, what is your one theme? What is your one thing that is an idea worth spreading? And how could you spread that idea and talk about it in such a way where there's zero commercial, like you can do zero marketing or advertising, in a TEDx, which, by the way, is a phenomenal lesson. From a guy who's a born marketer, like being able to produce an idea worth sharing, that first one was incredibly hard. I mean, it was painfully hard, right? But once you do one, you're like, oh, I can do this. This is great. Let's spread the idea first. Let's spread the notion first. And then we'll tie it in later. So whether it's a business decision, a business idea, where to go to dinner, anything that you have as a decision, instead of thinking about jumping right into the black box, why do you ask questions on the inputs and the outputs? And all of a sudden, the black box becomes easy. So as a entrepreneur, I've trained my teams to focus on that. And the thing that is kind of the gotcha moment is when I jump into the black box and I say, hey, listen, I'd like you to do this and I want to make it happen. My team goes, Mitchell, what's the input and output? And I'm like, I can't believe I did that. We all as humans just sometimes jump right into the black box. We end up just trying to solve a problem, make things happen. And the best lesson you can have in life is to, and I've used it in almost every decision, is at first step back a second, look at your inputs, look at your outputs before you start navigating that black box.
Wow. Very, very interesting concept. Were you the one coming up with that? Is that your motto?
No, I can't take credit for that one. That is in the IT space, the information technology space. That is a classic approach that's used, input out.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I heard it before, but the black box basically portion of it, that sounds very Mitchell-like. So I thought maybe that's his portion of it. But you said something.
No, I take no credit other than using it. And then I've also, what's interesting is I've created a course. I think it's a 17-minute course, and I've gifted it away for free.
Sure.
Just because I want to. What I've done as I've learned more about credibility and clarity is I want people to be able to use it and to be able to use different techniques. So what I've decided these days, because thought leadership is now ubiquitous, I've decided to still, for those people who are in my community, whatever we're talking about, and they go, "Hey, I'm curious about that. You know what? I know this is a lot of time, but could you take 17 minutes and take this course?" Right. And so I'm happy to share that with you so you could put it in the show notes. And there's, I call it my Clarity Superheroes community. And I've got a bunch of courses. For those listening, I'll put it in, but it's, I use a URL shortener called aha.pub. I just basically made it up. Anyone can, you buy a domain and you could deploy internet technology to do a URL shortener. Sure. So it's aha.pub, aha.pub/superheroes. And that is a complimentary community. And in it are some really cool short courses, like a valuable lesson I learned, or Marshall Goldsmith, who's the #1 CEO coach on the planet. He gave me an idea of the best advice he's ever received. So I made that into an 8-minute course, right? So just, and many of the courses there are complimentary.
Lovely. You said something that I want to rebound on because it's very interesting. You said, when I was doing TED Talk, since there is no basically marketing allowed, when I'm a born marketer, the first one was very hard. And this is something that I see I interact with a lot of public speakers, a lot of thought leaders myself. That's always what they say. There's this very fine line with promotion and just being salesman type of person. And that fine line is one that I think is crossed by many, I think, fantastic and people that want to be thought leaders, but unfortunately cross that line too often and therefore just seem like another salesperson. When you were training yourself to formulate basically this idea without any basically salesy notion, is there any basically thought process that help you not only formulate the first one, but to duplicate that thought patterns to come up with the second, the third, and so on? Tell me more about basically the process itself on a personal level.
So let me talk about how I prep for both TEDx's.
Please.
Right. The first TEDx was pre-COVID. The second one was in 2001, which was right in the smack middle of COVID. So in the first one, I unlocked magic words. I'll tell you what really magic words. So what have I done? I've given you a secret formula. Man, you're really pulling stuff out.
Yes.
And that really is a secret formula. I've talked about a great tool for clarity, and now I'm going to give you magic words. The magic words was, on the first one, I was doing a ton of physical networking, and it was 2 months before by the time they finally said yes, and by the time I was ready, I had 2 months to practice.
Sure.
So I was at least one physical event where somebody else was speaking per week. I would go to the conference organizers ahead of time and hear the magic words. I am giving a TEDx. Is it possible that you find time for me to practice? And for some odd reason, everyone I asked said yes. So it ranged from an audience of 8 to an audience of 300. And it just magic words. Coming to your conference. I don't know if it's possible at all. Now maybe the fact that my CV is, you look at my LinkedIn profile, it's pretty credible. And they're like, oh, yeah, of course, I'll put Mitchell Levy on stage, right? So maybe that helps. It probably helps more than others.
Definitely does. That's for sure. And you're the accredited guys. You know that. You know that. You're playing humble here, but that's definitely a lot of the legwork.
That does help a little bit, right? But here's the thing. If you're a thought leader in a very focused vertical, the people in the vertical are going to know you, whether they are friends or competitors, or people you work with, they're going to know you. And if you are going to speak at events in the vertical that people know you, it's the same thing.
Yes.
It's the same. So in the first TEDx, I had a lot of time to practice. And I would always make sure I found somebody in the audience to give me some I'd say, hey, listen, this is practice. I mean, I would say it publicly, but not many people would I'd say publicly, I'm practicing for my TEDx. Could you please give me, feedback? But I would always have at least one person I'd call on, and I always got good value, good feedback from people. Now, first of all, before I talk about the second one, I want to use the concept of the word feed forward. Marshall Goldsmith has focused on the word feed forward versus feedback. Feedback is this concept of, hey, I'm going to give somebody bad ideas. You did this. I think you're wrong in this particular way. Excuse me. Yeah, you told me to have water by my side.
Yep.
So actually, you may need to speak for a second while I get control of my voice.
That's okay. That's okay. And because from that perspective, and you're definitely right. And like I said, there's something to say about this concept of feedback and feed forward, which I'm sure you will explain more. In my hypothesis, perhaps, is that feedback is something that, hey, you did something wrong there. And then feed forward might be, hey, you might want to review basically the tone of how you said such things because, I don't know, X, Y, Z could be beneficial to your audience. I'm just basically speaking out loud here. But I would really love if you could explain to me not only the differentiation between feedback and feed forwards, but also just how important feed forward is as a concept, perhaps as a standalone.
I am not so sure how long my voice will last, but I will do my best. Sorry about that. Feed forward is the concept of when somebody asks for feed forward or feedback. It's the concept of giving something that is constructive in a positive ways. So it's something they can't change.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You were speaking in a room and the light sucked. It doesn't matter. You can't really do anything about that, right? And so when you're asking for feed forward, it gives people the permission to say, yeah, I didn't like it because. Whereas you ask for feedback, sometimes, your friends are going to say, oh yeah, that looks great. I mean, you ever go to a shoe store, you try on shoes and the person who's helped, oh, those look great. And they all look great, right?
Yeah.
What you really want somebody to be honest. These don't look as good, or these look that they don't fit, or these don't look good with the tone of your skin, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of feed forward. Now, on the second TEDx, it was during COVID. So I couldn't use those magic words, which were, hey, I'm speaking at a TEDx. Can I practice on your stage? So I had to make my own stages. So I actually did what we're doing right now. I set up 30 people who would give me feed forward on my TEDx. And it was 30 Zoom calls where I would stand up, I'd give the TEDx and I'd say, what do you think? And if anything else comes to mind, let me know. And it turns out that my 11th person giving me feed forward, guy by the name of Ted Lau, gave me an idea that I actually incorporated into the TEDx. And so I actually used his name and incorporated the idea as I spoke. And so the thing since I'm talking about, sharing cred dust, I wanted to share his cred dust, right? And it's often interesting when you think about as you travel through life. Even today, I had a call with somebody who she currently has metastatic breast cancer. She's been dealing with it, and what she's been focused on is she's got that quote unquote death sentence or expiration date that often happens, that the doctor gives you when that happens. And she's been thinking about it, focusing on it, helping to build a community. And when I talked to her today, and we, by the way, were together, we met originally in 2020, right before COVID. We met on what's called the Marketers Cruise, and we just really hit it off and liked each other. We've talked a couple times since, but I haven't seen her or really talked to her since the diagnosis. And so she surprised me today by saying that. And we were talking to her about each other, and I couldn't help but turn on my clarity ears, right? And what was interesting is she was talking about, and she is a lot like me. What entrepreneurs do really well is they see trends, they see things happening, they put process around it, and then they make it simple for people to understand and then obviously buy, because a confused mind doesn't buy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I was talking to her, and she came up with this great formula and this great framework and all that stuff. And she wanted to call her new podcast that framework and that's the brand she wanted to go out with. And I've learned something really, really important in the last couple months. It's something I've known forever, but I actually haven't been deploying until I really had to. And the reason I had to, by the way, is simply that 2023 was an interesting year for the world. 2023 is the year in which thought leadership has become ubiquitous. Anyone who wants to be a thought leader and come up with great thoughts, all they have to do is learn how to give the right prompts to AI. So if thought leadership is ubiquitous, what's appropriate is people need more the human-to-human action, and you need to be more narrow who you are and who you focus on. And this is the phrase that I've known but didn't use before. Sell them what they want, deliver what they need.
Mm-hmm.
So when I gave you my 2 CPOPs before, for CEOs, I am selling abundance. For business owners, I'm selling a more successful business because they're getting more Zoom calls. But what are they really getting? Behind the scenes, they're getting clarity and credibility, right? So when I was talking to my friend, what kept popping into my mind was, she mentioned it, the concept of no expiration date. And I'm like, I can't, like, so anyhow, we came up with a CPOP for her, and it was metastatic breast cancer patients with no expiration date. And it's like, that's it. People will remember it. This is something that people want to be involved with. This is something like when you get the diagnosis, you're not ready, but there'll be a referral partner who will remember no expiration date. Right. And so it's you need to find ways that you resonate with the audience that's appropriate for you. And you need to come up with that thing. In her case, this was her kryptonite that she turned into a superpower because she's already past expiration. Right. And
yes.
So the question for any entrepreneur is, who is the audience? What is it that they have as a pain point or pleasure point? Does that tie well into your kryptonite that you've turned into a superpower?
Beautiful. It's actually the third time you mentioned that thought leadership is now ubiquitous, which is quite interesting. And you also merge basically that idea now just from your past comment with AI. And when you're thinking about now not only the importance, but just the sheer the fact that it's essential to have a basically personal brand in this digital age, do you think that the overuse of AI, or perhaps the relentless pursuit of duplicating the human aspect with AI, is that the biggest mistake you think that professionals are making now when building a professional brand?
could I ask you for clarity on that statement? Because I interpreted it in a couple of different ways. So give me an example, or give me what you're thinking about.
Sure. Let's say that you are a professional in which try to establish themselves as a thought leader in youth education, perhaps. And basically her objectives is to find a way in which she can communicate through books, through talks, and so on, through thought leadership posts on LinkedIn, for example, in which to establish an audience of parents in order for them to basically create this community of better educated children. I'm making this up, by the way. This is perhaps a route that is recommendable, is to use basically AI as a way to increase the sheer amount of output, because that it can increase dramatically your productivity. But or would you say basically that AI would be perhaps a negative consequence, because you would lose the authenticity and the actual credibility of that person trying to build that brand? Where's the line with using AI, perhaps?
So the reason I asked that question, not only so I could have a quick cough, but was so I could understand the inputs and outputs. And I'm still not 100% clear. So let me define what that could be.
Sure.
I think if you're using a tool like AI and you think the most important thing, middle of the funnel, black box stuff, if you think the most important thing is to put out more and more articles, that's a black box question. What you have to look at is the inputs and outputs, right? So in this case, using your example, the input is, I would call the customer, being the youth that need to be educated, I would call the client the parents, right? So the input is, I have parents and I know a way in which the parents can help their kids be better educated, where kids will still listen to them. What's the output? Right. On the output side is you have to make decisions of what that is. Since I don't know what that is, that's, right. So in the black box, how you execute against whatever output you decide you want to be. By the way, if the output is, I want to grow a YouTube channel to be, 1 million followers, I don't believe that's the right output. Right. The output, I would say the output could be a really good output. What if I was able to get 100 parents to pay X amount of dollars and their kids have significantly changed their lives? And if that money was enough to live on an annual basis, that's a great output, right? So if you put that as your output, then what happens is, well, what do I need to do to get to 100? Whether it's 100 or 500 or whatever, or sure, 50, doesn't matter, right? What matters is, let's make sure we know what the output is. Right. And if we know the output, then AI is a part of the black box to help us get to the output. But you want to keep in your mind, what is it that I'm really doing? What am I really focused on? By the way, at the end of the day, to use this example, because this is one of the most important examples today, is having discernment. Anything you see, anything you hear, you need to have discernment. Oh, it's so funny. It is so easy these days to create spoof videos. I was watching YouTube and I just came back from CES. So coming back from CES, you get to watch all this technology stuff. And there was this incredible video where Honda had produced a $5,000 flying car. And it had the name, it had the video. It was all the B-roll, beautiful sound. And I'm like, this sounds amazing. It can't be true. So then I Googled it and I went to AI and asked about it. And they go, yeah, not possible. Right. But they got me for about 5 minutes before I'm like, this is so well done. Right. And so the most important thing we can, as parents, encourage our kids to have is discernment. You hear something and then you got to figure out what that's the number one thing we can do. So if the question became, if the output was, I'm going to make sure that 100 or 500 kids can actually say they have discernment, and I'm going to run my life for the next 2-3 years making that a business, Now you could use AI to help make that happen.
Interesting. So it needs to be a tool for the outcome and not just there's the full engine perhaps without discernment.
That's the biggest problem. It's quote unquote a panacea.
Yes.
You could use AI for everything. And the question becomes, well, why do I care about you versus somebody else? It's your thought leadership I get excited about. Even if your thought leadership was originated from AI or your thought leadership was enhanced with AI, it's still yours. And I want to pay attention to you, Sam, if this is your program, right?
Absolutely. And look, Mitchell, from my just brief mathematics behind this, basically this conversation, this is now your fifth decades of work, professional work, perhaps, if I'm just putting this out loud now, right? And this is just to make you more credible, by the way, more seasoned, nothing else. But you're entering your fifth.
It really is. Yeah. You're calling me. Okay, never mind.
No, but the reason why I say this is because obviously you've seen a lot of things. And I am a true believer that live experience is something that is still to this day radically underrated. We still understand that it's important, but nowhere near the level as important as it is. That's my opinion. But I'm thinking, I want to pick your brain on this as we're talking about AI and sort of the future of work. But when you're thinking about how you were able to stay ahead and how other leaders basically can stay ahead, you've always been at this forefront of the Silicon Valley now, obviously throughout your career. And just understanding how important adaptation is, right? A new tool comes in, and new competitors are entering the same markets. An employee basically need to basically get it off to another company because they have a better offer, whatever it is. You need to be, adaptation is so important and makes human beings the greatest creature on earth, by far the most powerful one at least. And I was wondering, when you're thinking about key leadership traits that will be the most valuable in this decade forward, what would they be and why?
So it's really hard not to immediately think about the credibility values. But the first one that pops to mind is, and this is not a credibility value, but just listening. It's sort of a function of being credible.
Sure.
Right. You need to listen to your stakeholders. You need to listen to the employees. You need to listen to the customers. You need to listen to the marketplace. So from a credibility perspective, the two most important elements are being a servant leader and being coachable, right? No matter how big you become in terms of running businesses, if you're a leader, the day you become uncoachable is the day you become uncredible. There's always something to learn from every interaction you have, right? In terms of staying ahead, it's as an entrepreneur being different than a leader of a corporation. As an entrepreneur, it's, what are you doing that A, you're having fun doing, and B, you're making money doing it, right? And that's going to change who you are and how you show up. I ran 4 book publishing companies since 2005, and up until COVID, they produced nice 6-figure businesses. And then all of a sudden COVID came and it almost went to zero.
Yeah.
Oh, what's next, right? So fortunately, in 2019, I started interviewing. I thought to myself, hey, I got all these clients, having published 750 books. I have all these clients. What is it that my authors were looking for? Credibility. What's the definition of credibility? I didn't think it was right. This comes back to the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah.
And what I was really doing, and I spent $50,000 on that, all that research. What I was really doing is prepping myself with a language. So the language of credibility now is being able to talk under the constructs of 10 values. And I was showing myself, or I didn't know I was doing this at the time, but I allowed myself to gravitate to be one of the best top clarity people on the planet. Because if you have clarity, it means you have focus. If you have focus, you can be a better thought leader, because those people who need to hear your thoughts, you're channeling in that right direction, and they're hearing you and paying attention to you.
Yes.
And as a leader, it is also important to have clarity. it's very important to be able to have, not just as a leader, not just clarity of where you're going, but clarity for those who are either quote unquote forced to follow you because you have authority because of title. But more importantly, those people who follow you because they know it's the right thing to do, because they want to.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Obviously, awareness and clarity is where everything starts. But I was browsing Teen King Museum, which is an incredible resource that I recommend to anyone. And I came across a quote by one of my favorite American author of all time, which is Alvin Toffler. And when he was talking about the in Future Shock, which is one of his numerous book, he was talking about this concept of what the 21st century will look like. And he said, this is incredible, by the way. You'll love this. He said, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And
I remember that. Yeah, I read Future Shock. Yes, agreed. Yeah.
And then this is phenomenal to me, because when you're thinking about just how much humans interact with machines, and it seems the more we're doing it, the more we actually are becoming machines ourselves, which is also a very interesting parallel in the way we discuss. That quote, which, mind you, that's 1980, by the way, is such a powerful one. And I think ties very well with what you just basically mentioned, because the art of listening, if you truly think about it, that's the only way in which not only you can learn, but it's also the only way in which you can basically relearn if necessary. The unlearn, that's another discussion, and that's probably perhaps the most difficult part of this process. But that is so key to, I think, the world understanding now, and I think that technology will be able to help us all read and all write. That's my belief, and I think that's a beautiful thing for the world. But that specific critical mind, there's that discernment, as you said very well, is something that I believe still quite only a few people will remains very active towards. And I think I just wanted to mention this because I thought it fits so well within these conversations. And truly, Mitchell, one thing that I want to finish this conversation with is legacy. All right. We actually, you mentioned legacy when I quote Bezos, basically during these conversations, and you think that legacy is the ultimate measure of success. That's a direct quote from you. But I'm wondering, your impact obviously goes so above business success. All right. And in your work, obviously inspired leaders and to create basically meaningful legacies of their own. But when you look back to your life works and even your current work, if you had to perhaps put it in words, what would you want your legacy to be for this world?
By the way, it was such a good quote, and I only remembered like 1 or 2 words from it. So while you were talking, I typed in what was the unlearned quote from Alvin Toffler's Future Shock book, and GPT gave me back the entire quote and a paragraph on it.
Yeah.
By the way, since I created my own, there is a Mitchell Levy GPT. Like, by the way, if you're listening to this, if you don't have your own GPT, you're being silly. As an entrepreneur, spend the $20, buy ChatGPT, create your own GPT, load it with who you are. So not only can you ask yourself questions and get great responses, but your team can ask questions when you're not in the room. Sorry, what was the question again?
You made me. I meant to what I'm asked.
Sorry, I made myself lose the question.
But what I was saying is, and I was talking about legacy. I will just reiterate the question itself.
Oh, right, starting with legacy,
but when
what's Mitchell Levy's legacy? Right.
Yeah, when you look back at it, perhaps if you can put it into words, I'd really like to hear it from you specifically, because I didn't find it actually in your writings on that. I think it's so important to who you are.
The most important thing, I think legacy, the definition I gave earlier is, what do people talk about you when you're not in a room?
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm doing now is I've gone through the coursework for my PhD, but I'm at the stage where I need to actually really buckle down and focus on the dissertation. And so my next book that's going to come out has to come post that. So I need to focus on it. And it's going to be focused on, and this is where I've been sort of not struggling. Struggling is the right word. It's do I focus on clarity in leadership, or do I focus on that concept of abundance in leadership, which incorporates clarity? I believe it's going to be abundance. So how do we live an abundance life? Well, abundance means so many different things to different people, as it should. Abundance to one person, if you think about the black box, is going to be different than somebody else. So it depends on your inputs and outputs. And I think having a CPOP, having a clarity statement of how you're executing on your purpose is going to change everything for so many people, both humans and for companies. So my legacy is this concept of CPOP, this concept of clarity is something that people absolutely think about, whether they think about me or not as a result of that. But I just need it to be ingrained into the human psyche that we just get significantly more clear on any human engagement, any human encounter.
Beautiful. Carve your name on arts, not tombstone. Mr. Mitchell Levy. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the Meaningful Podcast, and sharing some of your best insight was truly an extraordinary journey. And I would love if you could share some last words of wisdom with our audience.
If this was of interest to you, if this is something that you get excited about, a lot of times when people say, how do you reach out to you? They give you a gazillion different locations. What I want to do is just give you my website. It's mitchelllevy.com, MITCHELLLEVY.com. Now on it, it's always some of the latest, greatest things. I'm doing webinars on why aren't we getting the referrals we need. I have paid for sessions on getting clarity. I guarantee or your money back that you'll get your clarity statement. I also am doing other things, but probably most importantly, if you want to book time on my calendar, go to mitchelllevy.com and you can actually see my calendar and book time directly there. And so I want to make sure that I'm available for those who this resonates with, and we'll have a conversation.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.